I don't blame people for saying that I'm a political guy. That is my day job, right? And so I'm focused on the second most important thing that I think a human being can focus on. So then, of course, everyone says, what's the first thing? Okay, well, the first thing is winning souls for Jesus Christ. Most important thing. Well, then, Charlie, what's the second thing? To make sure you can do the first thing.
Thanks for coming.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
So, Charlie, who are you? Where did you come from? How does all this stuff happen?
I'm a child of God, and Jesus is my Savior, and grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to Christian Heritage Academy, where I gave my life to the Lord in 5th grade. Went from there to public school, graduated high school, and I had no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. And I started Turning Point USA, and I did that instead of going to college.
So Turning Point USA, maybe some of our audience isn't familiar with it. Talk a little bit about Turning Point, why it exists, and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, we're the nation's largest organization that is focused on a daily basis to make sure your kids and grandkids live in a free country. Wow. We're losing the West, and we're losing it for a variety of different reasons. And Turning Point USA, we operate with a sense of urgency to turn the country back to the ideas of liberty, which is God's idea, not man's idea. Freedom, which is granted from God, not government. The Constitution, which is a divinely inspired document, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others. And this is something that I think that every Christian and any person with a moral conscience should care about. And so, but at Turning Point USA, we do this in a variety of different ways, through high school and college chapter development, through our work with the biggest events in the entire movement. We are dominant on digital and social media. We do this through our campus leadership project. We do this through our pastor network. There's a variety of different ways that we do this at Turning Point USA. But look, we want to make sure that American values are passed down to the next generation. And we make very clear moral claims that liberty and freedom is not just the best way to live, but it's necessary for a flourishing human existence.
What do you consider to be the defining issues of our day?
Oh, there's several. To kind of bring it to a metaphysical realm, what is truth and what is true? And that kind of explains the whole transgender debate. It explains kind of the idea of racial politics in America. So definitely objective versus subjective existence is one of the biggest issues, no doubt. But if I kind of had to distill it down to the issue that impacts that, which impacts all the other issues, which is what we focus on at Turning Point USA, it's education. How we educate young people is one of the most, if not the most important issue for a civilization to continue. That impacts our spiritual health, our mental health, our physical health, our civilizational health. And we've done a pretty poor job of it. We've done the opposite. We've indoctrinated young children. We have filled them up with bad ideas. We've told them to hate themselves and hate the country and believe there's no God. And then there's other issues as well. Declining sovereignty, internationalist forces trying to crush America, a guilt-ridden nation that has strayed from the Lord, a weak church, an increasingly weak and passive church with obvious exceptions, right? Obvious, which we've talked about, and that's not an exhaustive list. So yeah, I mean, these are some massive issues. A spiritual battle that it seems as if so many people don't even want to admit exists. So I could focus on any of those, but that's definitely a starting point.
So it seems like when most people identify with you, rather than immediately say, well, he's a religious person, they refer to you more as a political person. And yet, faith is central to who you are, what you do, and I'm not going to say your politics are formed from that, but your life approach is basically biblically based. Yeah. So how does someone who is so biblically based find themselves in the midst of so many controversial political things? How has that emerged, Charlie? Or how has your voice found its way into those places?
Yeah, I've been a Christian since 5th grade, and I've always just kind of been a political animal. I've just kind of enjoyed trying to call out lies and deceit and, untruth and mistruths, I guess you could say. And I don't like bullies, and I don't like the strong terrorizing the weak. I've never liked that. And that's a moral claim, by the way, that comes from the Bible. So politics kind of puts all that together. I will be honest, though, in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, I felt a lot more passive about talking about my faith because I was kind of told not to, both by pastors and politicians.
Wow.
If you think about it, pastors are like, don't you dare bring that in here. Don't bring it in the church. I grew up in a church environment that you do not talk about politics. You do not talk about philosophy. You just talk about the Bible. We just do the gospel. That's it. which of course is, I believe, unbiblical, right? Wow. Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Esther, Mordecai, Daniel, amongst many others, were all political figures.
Yes.
Fasted and prayed for the nation.
Even Deborah.
Yeah, exactly. The counselors to the king.
Yes.
So there's many examples of that. But then also politicians like, oh, no, keep that Christian stuff away. We just care about tax cuts and all this other nonsense. And it was 17, 18, 19, you get older, things start to clarify more. And I met Rob McCoy, who is my pastor and does such a great job. And he really kind of changed my perspective on that. But look, I don't blame people for saying that I'm a political guy. That is my day job, right? And so I'm focused on the second most important thing that I think a human being can focus on. So then, of course, everyone says, well, what's the first thing? Okay, well, the first thing is winning souls for Jesus Christ. Most important thing. Well, then, Charlie, what's the second thing? To make sure you can do the first thing.
That's good.
It's my day job.
That's good.
So when we talk about believers and standing up for our rights, what does the Bible say about getting involved? I know you touched on it, but what should we do? I mean, it's more specifically, what should we biblically do as believers?
Yeah, some people believe that the church or Christian should not comment ever about local politics or about being a citizen. They say, all we do is the gospel and we don't get engaged in those sorts of things. Well then, there's a lot of verses that they're going to have to explain with that sort of a position. Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation or the city of which you are in, because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare. That's the Lord speaking in Jeremiah 29:7. Now, in every church you'll go to, you'll probably hear Jeremiah 29:11, which is one of the most quoted scriptures, for I know the plans I have laid in front of you. But rarely do you hear about Jeremiah 29:7, which is a commandment to care about what's happening in the local nation or city. Not to mention Daniel, Esther, Mordecai, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, and let's just focus on Daniel in particular. Daniel fasted and prayed for the well-being of the nation that he was in. And so Daniel was faced with a choice that the American church was faced with, that Steve Smotherman was faced with, that Legacy Church was faced with. It was the Daniel trial. And I'll tell you, before we go any further, 98% of American churches failed the Daniel trial. And the Daniel trial was very clear. In Daniel 6, there was a conspiracy, a legitimate conspiracy, kind of launched against Daniel, where I forget the names of certain individuals that then lobbied King Nebuchadnezzar, basically saying, we don't like this Daniel guy, he has too much influence, kind of like the American church, isn't it? And we don't like what they're doing, so we're going to pass a series of measures that are in defiance to Old Testament commandments from the Torah, and Daniel's going to have to choose whether or not to obey God or to obey this government edict. And one of the orders was that you are not able to pray in a certain capacity, especially in public and facing the city. So Daniel hears about this, and the scriptures tell us that Daniel was grieved by it, but then Daniel made a conscious decision. Daniel opened up the window for all to see, and he intentionally disobeyed the government and the king's orders, and he prayed to the city for all the people to see. So that was an act of what would be first called Old Testament civil disobedience. That's the equivalent of you being here at church tonight. Now, all of you know the story of Daniel in the lion's den. That's how he got in the lion's den. We don't always talk about that. Like, oh yeah, he's in the lion's den and God delivered him from that. And of course, that's the other part of the story, is that God will never forsake his children when you obey his commands. Yeah. And that's a very important thing.
We're the first nation ever founded, where our people who founded the country voluntarily gave up power. Wow. It's never happened before. The people who wrote the Constitution got less powerful when they wrote it. It's never happened before. We're the only country where you could say we have a date and a birthday. Not at the time. For example, what is China's birthday? They're like, I don't know, like 600 BC. Okay, that's not very specific. Like, what's France's birthday? I don't know, they kind of came up. Now, the fact we have a date's a big deal. Why? Because we made specific moral claims. We said that when in the course of human events, because necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that ties the one to the other, the separate but equal station, it goes on to say the laws of nature and nature is God. That's a big deal. And we made moral claims of that. And with 55 of the 56 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Bible-believing, church-attending Christians. We're the most charitable, generous, productive, open-minded, accepting country in the history of the planet. So yeah, I think we're exceptional.
That's awesome. Charlie, what advice would you give to our viewers who are afraid to take on controversial issues?
I get it. It is hard. So you just have to admit one truth, and then you could chart your course from there, which is you will not be able to get your country back and keep everything you have. It's impossible. You will lose friends, you'll lose contracts, you'll lose relationships, but you will gain in wisdom and in courage, and you'll actually end up gaining in friendships that matter. So no, the fear is totally correct if those things matter to you.
What can we do to stay informed and not get overwhelmed?
Yeah, so that's the other thing where people say, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Learn every day. Dedicate time to learn. I love learning. And learning is so important because it will make you less anxious about what's happening around you. And so, for example, if you know the characteristics of a constitutional republic and where they're trying to head us, you have such clarity on what their plan is, and then you'll be informed and empowered on how to stop it. You'll know what the Constitution says and does. Separation of powers, consent of governed, independent judiciary. All these are unique characteristics of a constitutional republic. And I know a lot of people watching this are just, I feel like I'm losing my country. I feel like I'm losing this. And there's two ways there's three ways. There's three ways people react to it, right? They react to it by being despondent and they just check out. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
Daniel fasted and prayed for his nation. Jeremiah 29:7. Which is demand the welfare of the nation of which you are in, because your welfare is tied to the nation's welfare. Wow. That's the Lord speaking.
Wow. It's good.
The next category is people get radical. They start believing weird stuff. Stop that. Like, if it comes from some sort of weird website that has like 50 numbers in it, it's just stop going down the rabbit hole and all that. I mean that. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
So then like, there must be a deeper plan at play. Probably isn't. Actually, I know all the actors. Probably not. Okay? Or the third thing you do is just act. Make hope happen. Do everything you can and leave the rest up to the Lord.